Future Sense is a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia at bayfm.org. Hosted by Nick Jeans and well-known international futurist Steve McDonald, Future Sense provides a fresh, deep analysis of global trends and emergent technologies. How can we identify the layers of growth, personally, socially, and globally? What are the signs missed, the truths being denied? Science, history, politics, psychology, ancient civilizations, alien contact, the new psychedelic revolution, cryptocurrency and other disruptive and distributed technologies, and much more. This is Future Sense. 10:17 here on Future Sense with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans through till 11 o'clock. Thanks for your texts, and we'll call for some more texts in a minute. Please engage. Dudley's written probably on climate change and temperatures around the world and the extremes that we're seeing. He says probably worth mentioning that lower global temperatures are more likely to generate long-term droughts due to locking up water in ice and snow.
That's quite correct, yeah. If we look at historical periods where it's been extremely cold, such as the mini ice ages, a whole bunch of water does get locked up in ice and snow, and there are other parts of the planet which are not covered by ice, which experience extreme drought and also heat. And the current, I think we mentioned this before on the show previously, with the current heat waves and drought that we're experiencing here in Australia has been linked to what they call the Indian Ocean dipole, which is something that arises from the presence of warm waters off the coast of Africa and cold waters just to the northwest of Australia, and those two extremes create the dipole. And of course, when you don't have warm water lifting moisture up into the atmosphere, you don't get the rain. And with our sort of Western Ocean there, the Indian Ocean being unusually cool at the moment, that's why we're experiencing drought here in Australia. Another text too, and you've texted a few times here, and you've ended up saying in capital letters, you said, in plain English, entropy is on the rise. And I see from your other text this morning you're talking about the collapse of and the lemming-like nature of humanity at this time. I guess we'd suggest something a little different about the observation of entropy, that because clearly many things, as we're saying, are breaking down, things are falling apart, structures are collapsing. That is true. It is true, but it's balanced out by the opposite happening in different parts of society, and this is it's a typical pattern when we go through a significant change like this. Is the old stuff's got to fall apart. It's as I often say, it's like a kid's Lego block toy. You can't flick your fingers and transform a ship into an airplane. You've got to pull a ship apart and then rebuild it with the building blocks. Or to get a little bit vegetal about it, I like to think that the old is like compost, as it's slowly decaying and collapsing and becomes literally compost for the future. Yeah, exactly. And it just depends what you choose to focus on. And at this time in history, because of the mainstream media, really, a lot of people are focusing on the decomposing matter rather than noticing the new sprouts that are coming through. And I stopped watching television in 2003 as one of the best things I ever did. I'd recommend it to all you out there listening. Is just don't look at mainstream media as your primary source of news. I mean, I still do. As a futurist, I have to keep tabs on what's going on and what the media are reporting. So I have a very strict regime of having a brief look at the headlines every day, just to see what people are talking about and what themes are emerging, and perhaps what manipulation is being played out. Having been in the military, you used to you have a phrase, an acronym called MSU. And I guess you've got a fairly good radar for that. What's MSU stand for? MSU is making stuff up. Or making shit up. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. I did, for one year of my time in the military, I was an intelligence officer in an infantry battalion, so it was my job to gather all the information that was brought in by our troops and put it all together and try and discern, what was actually going on out there. So I do have a bit of a background in that kind of thing.
And if you couldn't make sense of it, then you just make something up, or you just create a particle or a part of an equation that solves the equation, like a phonon.
I never did that.
No, of course not.
I never did that, and I wouldn't recommend it. But it's certainly a lot of people do it, it's all it takes is one person making stuff up and putting it on social media these days, and it's viral. It's going everywhere, particularly if it's interesting. So, what were we talking about?
Going forward.
That's right.
What can we see going forward?
Of course. All right. Things to look for. I think one of the next big things for humanity, and there are many different facets to this, is magnetism. And I can see this as a very, very important emerging discipline and area of interest. And it works on multiple levels, as all good things do. And one of the levels that magnetism will become more important in is our understanding of space weather and terrestrial climate. And I dug up an old NASA article here, which was older than I remembered. It actually goes back to 2008. It's on science.nasa.gov, and it's talking about magnetic portals that connect the Earth to the Sun. And it's this article. Let me just read a couple of lines from it. Tons of high-energy particles may flow through the opening before it closes again. And they're saying that these portals open and close once every 8 minutes or so. So they're only open for a short period of time. But when they are open, as it just said, tons of high-energy particles stream from the sun through to the Earth and into the Earth's atmosphere.
At the pulse of the time it takes for light to reach us from the sun, I think, is 8 minutes, interestingly.
Yeah, okay, you're right, yeah. And going back to the article, I'm quoting here, space physicist David Seebeck of the Goddard Space Flight Center. It's called a flux transfer event, or FTE. 10 years ago, I was pretty sure they didn't exist, but now the evidence is incontrovertible. There's a bit of critical thinking and scientific method being applied there. This is from 2008, and it says, today Seebeck is telling an international assembly of space physicists at the 2008 Plasma Workshop in Huntsville, Alabama, that FTEs are not just common, but possibly twice as common as anyone had ever imagined. And as with all new discoveries, they take a bit of time to land. I mean, an extreme example is quantum mechanics, which first emerged over 100 years ago and still hasn't actually landed in mainstream science. And here's something that NASA have discovered and researched and documented, which is these magnetic portals that open up in this massive influx of high energy particles, which go from the sun to the Earth. And in other material that I've discovered this year, including a wonderful video which we published and mentioned on the show a couple of times called Climate Forcing, these magnetic portals and the high energy particles are having an impact on terrestrial climate. But magnetism is not something that's included, as far as I know, in any of the conventional computer-based climate models which are being used for those predictions
IPCC
which don't seem to come true. Yeah, so this is a topic to watch, and the weather aspect of it is just one area. The other really, really big picture aspect of the space weather thing, of course, is the knowledge that our solar system is either approaching or already starting to transit through an area between what's called the local cloud, which our solar system's been flying through for as long as we know, and the local cloud ends and another piece of space begins, which is called the G cloud, and it looks like there may even be a null area in between those two clouds, which would be an area of low magnetic energy. And as we transit out of the local cloud through this null area and into the G cloud, who knows what might happen in terms of the impact on our solar system and the terrestrial climate, and that's something that's largely unknown, but only just on the radar. And again, it'll take a long time to land in mainstream.
Just quickly on the G cloud, because I wasn't familiar with that myself. Just this is simply from Wikipedia, but it says the G cloud or G cloud complex is an interstellar cloud located next to the local interstellar cloud. It is unknown whether the solar system is embedded in the local interstellar cloud or in the region where the two clouds are interacting. As you're saying
that's
there.
Right.
Although the solar system is currently moving towards the G cloud. So
yeah. And this is information from NASA's Interstellar Boundary Explorer mission, IBEX. And most of you will have heard of Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, those probes that were sent out many years ago. And Voyager 1, which is was launched after Voyager 2, but is actually in front now, has in the last year or two pierced the bow wave of our solar system. So as the sun and our solar system is sort of plunging through space, it's kind of like a ship pushing through the ocean. It has a bow wave, an energetic bow wave, which is particularly caused by the solar wind that the sun puts out, and Voyager 1 has just punched through that bow wave into interstellar space, and the pattern of cosmic wind that they've discovered there isn't what they expected, which may suggest that we have actually started to transition out of the local cloud
into the G cloud.
Yeah. So I think in the next decade or two, that's probably going to become quite big news.
And if you imagine, of course, many of you may have seen the photos or the videographic representations of the sun and the solar system moving through space. Absolutely beautiful, the incredible orbits of the planet and the spiral nature of the whole thing. And as soon as you see that, you see the complexity of the nature of it and the many forces, as you're saying. Particularly we're talking about magnetism here, but all those forces, gravitational, magnetic, electrical, that exist, and cosmic rays and so forth, that exist in and through and with us all the time, and this is a profound complexity that we've really only become aware of in very recent times, actually, and this is going to open up more and more, and I think it's going to change the equation of how we look at some of the bigger problems, including climate on the planet, the climate emergency, if you will.
Yeah, and other aspects of magnetism that we ought to look for, I think particularly in 2020, it's quite possible we hear a lot more about magnetic energy generators. So, in other words, machines that run on magnets which generate electricity. And these are already out there. In fact, there's a company here in Australia called Graph Energy, which is based nearby on the Gold Coast, which have been advertising a magnetic electric generator. Okay. And I'm looking at their website now. They're advertising two machines, a 10 kilowatt machine and a 1,000 kilowatt machine. And the way that they work is you need to plug them into a power point, an electrical power point, to kick them off, to kick-start them. But once the machine is running, you can disconnect it from the electricity and it will run. They are, for their 10 kilowatt model, they're advertising on their website here a 20-year lifespan, 24/7. It says the unit will work 24/7 for a 20-year lifespan. Now, I guess that's their best guess because they wouldn't have had 20 years to test that. No. However, I know this is not the only company in the world that has developed magnetic generators. I know of at least one company in the US, and there are probably more around the world. The company I'm thinking of, the US, hasn't gone public with it yet. But this, I think, will be a key aspect of energy generation in the future using magnetism. And my understanding is the way that these machines work is they have a drum, like a circular drum on an axis or an axle, and magnets arranged on the drum. And once the drum is in motion, the polarization between the magnets
keeps it going,
constantly just keeps it pushing and generating electricity in the process.
Sort of perpetual motion, almost. Suggesting that, moving towards that.
Yeah, so that's something to look for. And then the other realm of magnetism that we ought to look out for is I'm prompted to talk about this from some recent channelings from Cryon. And for those of you that may not have heard us mention Cryon before, Cryon is an out-there information source that we pay attention to. And because we do our best to take a trans-rational perspective on the world, so we're not just looking at logical, rational things, we're looking at emotional things, and we're looking at things that reflect perhaps a higher way of acquiring knowledge, which I like to call
paradoxical, non-linear living systems.
Quantum consciousness. And so Cryon is for those of you who don't know what Cryon is a disembodied entity. So in other words, you might use words like spirit, interdimensional being, those sorts of things, that speaks through an American fellow called Lee Carroll, and has been doing so for 30 plus years now. And the messages that come through Lee Carroll have often included news of future scientific breakthroughs which have actually come true. And it's this basis of okay, well, this actually seems to work, there's truth coming through, and we ought to be paying attention to what this Cryon is saying, and that's why we're following Cryon. So Cryon has said recently that we are on the verge of discovery of a device, and you might think of it as like a set of goggles or some sort of viewing machine, which will allow us to see our personal magnetic fields, in other words, the natural magnetic fields that surround our body, which can, Cryon says, be up to 8 meters wide. And the Heart Math Institute from the USA has been pushing into this area, looking at the heart, the energy radiated from our hearts, and how we can detect that in some ways, and the influence that one person's heart resonance has on another person in their presence, and those sorts of things. There's a whole body of very wonderful research. You can look that up on the internet, Heart Math Institute, if you're interested in that. But Cryon's saying that with the use of some kind of supercooling, we are on the verge of developing some device that will allow us to see our own magnetic field and through this device. And he suggested that it was on the purple end of the spectrum. So obviously it's not visible, because otherwise we'd be able to see it already. So we're looking at some light here on the electromagnetic spectrum, which is off the end of the UV side of the spectrum.
Yes, and of course, I guess a couple of things there. You could say it's an extension of the old aura photography that was quite popular, and that ability to be able to see colours around a being. Some people, of course, can see that quite naturally. The other thing I thought of as you're speaking, though, more interestingly, is the whole discussion around EMF, 5G being the big thing right now. But there is a lot of people who are becoming aware of sensitivity to electromagnetic frequencies in various ways. Lots of stuff we could say about that, but I'm thinking, well, isn't it interesting that magnetism as a future science and the application of that in various ways is coming forward at the same time people are being aware of that, of EMF frequencies and how they may affect an individual. So there's that sort of complementary experience that's going on both in discovery and in people's personal inner experience of these frequencies to some degree.
Yeah, that's right. And Cryon has suggested that when we make this discovery and we have this device and we can see this field around people, we're going to identify it as some sort of a life energy field, and the devices will also result in us seeing the same magnetic fields around plants, and also, wait for it, rocks.
Oh, rocks.
And basically everything is going to have a magnetic field. And he said this is going to disrupt our understanding of spirituality and lead to the development of a more sophisticated spirituality based on the understanding that everything has this underpinning of consciousness expressing itself as these fields. And also the other thing he said, basically he said that this is going to have a massively disruptive impact on humanity in a positive way, both disrupting our spirituality or understanding of spirituality, but also our capacity to read a person's health, because any health issues will show up in this field when they're viewed through this device.
And of course, there's always been people who, to one degree or another, psychic, you could say, who've been able to see or perceive these things in one way or the other already, to some degree. There's always been those way showers, and many great healers fall into that bracket, and we know a few of those, including yourself, I might say.
Who?
You.
My God.
Yeah, you.
You can't reveal all my secrets.
Not all of them. No, not that one.
Glad I stopped you. what I was going to say was you can see how magnetism in general has the capacity, just through improving our knowledge, our understanding, and our visibility of magnetic fields, to radically shift most things that we know. And I was about to say that Cryon said that this discovery of this viewing machine will have a similar kind of impact on humanity as the invention of the wheel did. So, I mean, that's a pretty extensive disruption in a very, very positive way.
Indeed.
So, yeah, the next big thing, perhaps, magnetism.
Fantastic.
I'll take a break and we'll come back for more.
Yeah, absolutely. You're on BayFM. You are tuned to Future Sense with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans through till 11 o'clock this morning.
Hot and spicy. BayFM. Radio with bite.
You're tuned to Future Sense here on BayFM and via podcast all over the world. Thanks for joining us in 2019 and stay with us in 2020 and spread the word on the podcast. We're going to be doing some exciting stuff this coming year anyway, but we're not going to tell you what they are yet. All sorts of things are going to emerge, I hope. Thanks for your texts. Just one other one for now. Hi guys, in capitals, everything is alive with energy and life. Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
It is indeed, and it goes down to atomic level, of course, and I subscribe to Nassim Haramein's view that every hole starting from the atom up has the nature of a black hole. So in other words, the nucleus is essentially a portal to other dimensions. And
so exciting.
Yeah. And so everything that has atoms has that portal through to the sort of quantum field of consciousness. So another theme for 2020, I think that we're going to see continuing, is going back to the future to make sense of the present. Back to the past to make sense of the future, which you might call Back to the Future, which apparently they made a movie about.
Yeah, they did. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
At the time. It was the 80s.
Totally. And there's a big retro thing happening at the moment too.
I know.
So you might want to go back and watch that. But yeah, so I guess transforming our understanding of the past, and we've been sold this linear progression story in our sort of mainstream narratives and our formal education, those sorts of things, that things were old and unsophisticated, and then they got better and better and better, and here we are, and yet we find these relics of prehistory that are exhibiting technologies that we don't have now, like things built with giant blocks, and giant blocks cut with such precision that there are no marks from tools, and in fact, rocks, massive rocks that are part of mountains that have been shaped into clearly artificial shapes, and yet we have no idea how it happened. So I think we're going to see this theme continue of revelations of things from our history, old technologies, that are going to force us to sit down and just realise that this linear progression from old and simple to present and complex just doesn't seem to fit, and there's something missing from our understanding of history. And of course our history was truncated most likely by some natural cataclysm which happened roughly about 12,000 years ago, which a lot of people are saying was the Younger Dryas event, which was caused by a massive comet breaking up and impacting the Earth and causing the famous floods that are written into our religious books, such as the flood Noah.
And before that too, because I think that myth goes back, of course, well before Christian times, the myth of the Great Flood.
Yeah.
Like many things in the Bible, frankly, it was borrowed from other places and adapted and used in the way that it's been used.
Well, it's, either that or it happened on a planetary scale.
Yes.
And everybody had a Noah, basically.
Everybody had a Noah. There's a song right there.
Yeah. So a couple of interesting pieces I've come across this year just on this theme are a wonderful book by Freddie Silva, Silva, called The Missing Lands, where he's done a really, really solid inquiry into the megalithic buildings around the world. And I tell you what, they are much more widespread than I had thought. I had no idea that there were megalithic buildings in some of the places that Freddie has reported them, like on some of the, not just Easter Island, but some of the, more central South Pacific islands and those sorts of things. The stories are woven into their local myths and traditions. of these people who, the Shining Ones, they're often called, who came and built these things and helped civilization recover from this massive cataclysm. And I really recommend Freddie's book if you're interested in that kind of stuff. I think it's a groundbreaking book. And he's done some really interesting linguistic analysis where he's visited different cultures around the world, listened to their stories, and looked at the root of some of the key words in the stories. And found these commonalities across different, which is really suggesting that there was a single group of these people who are often called the Shining Ones, or the Seven Sages is a very common story, or the Watchers is another term.
Star people.
Or star people as well, and maybe they were. And he's strung it together in a very, very solid fashion. Freddie's website is invisibletemple.com if you want to go and grab a copy of that. I really recommend that. And another interesting source that I found this year was from Greg Braden. And if you don't know who Greg Braden is, he's a scientist, qualified scientist who studied geology and then a lot of the different life sciences, and I believe worked in the aerospace industry for a while. And I had the pleasure of remotely meeting Greg on a teleconference call, which we had going, I think, a couple of years ago, and was organised by my futurist friend John Peterson from the Arlington Institute in the US. And there were, I can't remember exactly, but I think there were sort of 6 or 8 of us that would meet on this call on a regular basis and just talk about what was happening in the world from a futurist perspective. And again, a way of helping us try and make sense of our trajectory as a species and as a planet. And Greg was also on that call regularly, and I have a really strong impression of him being just a lovely guy who's quite humble and quite dedicated to the work that he's doing. And he has a series which is being screened on Gaia.com at the moment called Missing Links, and I recently watched Series 1, Episode 9, which was called Genetic Clues of Human Origin. And I'd heard about the science behind the stuff he presented in that episode previously, and largely through Greg. And basically he's looking at a discrepancy in the human genome, and particularly gene number 2, which isn't like the others. And the chromosomes in each of the genes have end caps on them, which are called telomeres.
Oh, yes, telomeres, yes.
And we have mentioned this on the show before. But in gene 2, it's clearly been manipulated, because apart from the end caps, the telomeres on the ends of the chromosomes, there's a couple in the middle which have clearly been joined together. And so, and this is very big in mainstream science. There are papers, in fact, Greg said there are whole conferences, scientific conferences that have been held by people studying the genome just simply on this gene number 2, and trying to figure out why is it different from the others, and what is the story. And the basic conclusion is that some process that we're not familiar with has happened to splice a couple of chromosomes and then join them together, which is why the telomeres have ended up in the middle. And also, not just that, but also that redundant aspects of each of the separate chromosomes were spliced off. And had that not happened, then we would have ended up with like a double functionality that we didn't need. So whatever process made this happen knew that and took out the redundant parts. And then when the splicing occurred, there had to be some kind of favourable conditions for that to then become, a functioning part of our genome. And Greg stopped short of suggesting who or what process might have caused that to happen, but he's just really strongly making the point that, as far as we know right now, natural evolution doesn't do this. And maybe sometime in the future we'll discover, a process which explains it, but right now we can't explain it. And it kind of strongly points to an active
engagement with our species at some time in the dim distant past for a purpose.
Something or someone has changed our genome at some point.
I think it's great too what you're saying just quickly as just speaking there, because I'm thinking that all of these things also add to the mystery, and it's, I guess, mystery, for want of a better word, it's a good word, is another aspect of what we need to be encouraged to feel, to experience, to to watch for synchronicities and serendipities and those moments of connection that are somehow a bit more than the normal experience of reality. Yeah. And this is part of our future. I think that we're becoming available to these experiences more and more.
Absolutely, and also a part of that same process is this merger that's underway between science and spirituality. And if you look at all of our central religions and the stories that come with them, they're full of stories of outsiders coming and interacting with us, and we call them angels and gods and all these sorts of things. But if you stop for a moment and think, well, hang on a minute, maybe what if the scientific story and the spiritual story were both correct from a particular perspective, and they're describing the same thing, but they're just looking at it from different angles. And so, we look like we're starting to piece together a very, very different version of history that involves the presence of higher consciousness on the planet, the presence of higher technologies on the planet, at a time when our mainstream narratives currently say that shouldn't be the case. They shouldn't have been here at the time.
But it's an indication, I guess, that we are becoming complex enough that our minds, literally, many of us are becoming available to a more complex experience of life, the universe and everything. And as that's becoming available, it's becoming more present for our perception. And that's interesting in itself, that as we allow ourselves to see something, to understand, to know something, then that something comes forward into our presence more in a way.
That's right, and that's one of the positive, constructive things of us moving beyond the scientific industrial era, is that mainstream science was really in a box in terms of what it would consider and what it would not consider. And there, of course, anything that couldn't be measured on an instrument or seen under a microscope in a laboratory didn't exist and wasn't worthy of investigation. And we're starting to move outside that box now, which is opening up all these other possibilities for us. Yeah.
Yes, and of course the result of that process that Steve's just explained there is the tendency towards scientism, which is a word really that's only been fairly recently quoted or made up, I think, and it is that point where science goes too far in one direction. It's been incredibly valuable, yes, and will continue to be so in the future, but it's not the only explanation for everything.
Yeah, I think that is a result of this shift in human values, and particularly the drivers in the different value sets, as we mentioned earlier, which sort of compartmentalise things into the old scientific method of critical thinking and what's emerging at the moment, which is this consensus-based way of assessing the validity of something, which is actually collapsing the cause and effect hierarchies and removing individual critical thinking from the process. And that's something to watch for the year ahead also.
Indeed. That's about it for the show, it looks like, isn't it?
It's about it for 2019.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
I just want this little quote from Mark Twain talking about history. I love this. Mark Twain said, "History never repeats itself, but it rhymes." And I like that.
I like that too. I often use that, actually.
Do you?
That's a really nice piece. I do, yeah. Not in front of you, though. But I can now that you've discovered it.
It's good to see that there's still mystery, and that you have to be at a certain level, certain order, in order to receive and accept the great mysteries that come from those higher up in the hierarchy.
Always preserve the mystery. That's one of the central tenets of Taoism.
Very true. Indeed.
Look, we've got some really interesting things coming up in 2020, and not the least of them is the return of our Texan elf.
Yes, Mitch Schultz will be back.
Landing in the country on the 6th of January, and Mitch is coming back to work with us on the development of a Future Sense documentary series, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that in the year ahead.
Fantastic. That's it. Have a great New Year's Eve. Take care. Be careful. And if you're in this region, take care of the environment, take care of each other. And we will be with you next Monday, which will be 2020. Thanks for being with us. And check out our podcast at futuresense.it or at your podcast platform that you already have linked up to us.
Yeah, thanks for being with us this year, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
You've been listening to Future Sense, a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, at bayfm.org. Future Sense is available on iTunes and SoundCloud. The future is here now. It's just not evenly distributed.